Since the first microchip, we live in it. Since the first microchip, we live in it.
The sound is electronic. The sound is sexy. The sound is electronic. The sound is sexy.
Good evening. I don't know why I become more sing-songy with each broadcast. By the end, I'm just going to be, I don't know, singing some kind of opera. Some good evening opera. So, listen, hi. Welcome. Here we are. Still going. We got about a week left of Music Making Month, so let's start savoring the evenings here we have together. So, listen, I want to welcome everybody, and I want to give you guys a couple of new rules if you're new to the group. Simple rule, really. If you've got a question for me, just throw the word question, all caps, into the chat before your question, and I can see it. That will be good. Like, for example, Enoch Light says, "What's opera, Doc?" Oh, no. No. If I had a buzzer, I would... No. And you tricked me into reading that on the air, too. And so, otherwise, the only thing you need to know is if you want to have your music featured in Music Making Month, then you can do that. You just need to send me a tweet, and if you put tweet us a link to your like a SoundCloud song, and put the hashtag #MMMPropSongs, and I'll search that every day, and I check it out. I listen to songs, I pick one, or you can put it on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/Propellerhead. So I think that's all we need to know. So I'm going to now leave you in far smarter hands than myself with with a guy who goes by the name, he's in our forums as Edit Ed for TV, but this, I guess, tonight would be Live Ed for TV, and he is his name is Ed Bauman. He is a synth genius of sorts. He's got one of these sort of I'm going to compare him to Rain Man, but not in a bad way. Like, he's got this talent for hearing a sound and knowing how to create it. And he makes these things that he has dubbed recovers, which is cover songs where he recreates every synth and drum hit and thing that you hear in the song. And they sound so authentic that when he puts them up on YouTube, the YouTube bots identify him as the original track and go like, hey, you can't put up that song, which I think is an amazing credit to him. Let's just wear that like a badge of honor. So anyway, let's bring him on and say hello. Ed Bauman, say hello to the internet.
Hello, internet. How are you? How are you, Ryan?
I am good. How are you?
I'm okay.
Yeah,
a bit nervous, but I'm all right.
You're fine. I have to say, you get kudos for the microphone. You sound lovely.
Why, thank you.
Well, now you sound creepy.
I'll stay a good, fair distance away then.
Say a certifiably non-creepy distance from the mic. But everyone is, you're getting applause and greetings from the chat, so everyone is saying hello to you.
Thank you.
Were you just doing your own applause in the background?
I was doing a golf clap.
Oh, okay, right. So tell me, Ed, let's just talk a little bit about this. Your background in this is nothing. This is nothing you come to new. This whole idea of recreating sounds that you're hearing, right?
No, I've been doing it. What am I now? 43, coming up on 44 in July. I started. I got my first when we were talking before we started here. Started with the Lowry organ way back in the early 70s when I was all of maybe 5 or 6 years old, and my aunt Dolores, she's the last of the Baumans left in the old family. We, my brother and I, we took lessons from her, and sometime in 78 or so, my dad did a deal with some people that he knew, and he got a newer Lowry organ, and that's what's behind me here. I still have it. How pathetic is that? We couldn't get rid of it. And so, much to my wife's chagrin. And so sometime around like 80 or so, I lived in Redwood City, across on the San Francisco Bay Area on the left side in the peninsula. And my dad and I went to Gelb Music on El Camino in Redwood City, and I was drooling over the Sequential Circuits Pro 1, which was pretty new back then, and I couldn't afford a Prophet 5, so instead of getting 5 voices, I got 1 voice with the Pro 1. And when I got the Pro 1, it was just, opened up this whole world of like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I can make my own sounds. So I would spend hours listening to, like, I'd plug my headphones into the Lowry organ, play one of the patches, then I'd pull the headphones out, plug it into the Pro 1, and try to recreate it. And literally just, 4, 5, 6 hours at night, this little 12, 13-year-old kid trying to remake all these sounds. And so that's how I pretty much just started recreating things and learning to use my ear to hear things and how to reverse engineer sounds and stuff. So it only went further and further through there. And then, of course, back in the 70s, all we had was, the synthesizers just started coming out, but we had, the Rhodes, and we had the B3, and we had the, Wurlitzer, and that's about it. And then these other synth sounds started coming around when synthesizers got affordable. That just, the 80s were just huge for me, and of course.
The funny thing about it to me, though, is that when synths came out, and when you look at early synth promotional material, they were boasting of how they could recreate organs, and they could recreate guitars and violins, and, and now it's like we've so abandoned that concept that we can try and recreate acoustic instruments with these. But now the trick is trying to not recreate acoustic instruments, but to recreate other synths that you've heard. That's that's the actual achievable goal with a synth, is to use this synth to sound like that synth. And there's
exactly.
I got the whole cottage industry.
I mean, I have a lot of appreciation for people who are like total purists. Like they'll hear like something like in Thor, and the patch will be called like Moog this or ARP that or Roland something or other, and it's like it needs to be like just exactly what that synth was. And I'm more of like it's pretty much close enough. And I mean, if I were going to do an A/B and listen to specific notes, and it's like, wow, well, that one's actually 3 dB lower in the left channel when you play it. And it's like, I'm not going to get that detailed about it, because for the most part, the synths that I'm making for what I'm doing, it's one synth in verse 3 of this one song, and there's drums and bass and guitar and other pads all around it. So it's not going to be this nitpicky thing where, I mean, with all due respect, but it's not going to be this thing where it's like, that's kind of far off from the original. It's like, no, it's good enough, and it works. It suits its purpose.
Right. Well, and so I wanted to ask you about I guess your early forays, because I think when you started out, you're probably where a lot of us were in terms of making these synth sounds. And I can speak to myself. It is a frustrating thing to hear a sound in your head, or maybe to hear a sound on record and go, yes, that's what I want. Now what? And what is the now what? I mean, how do we get to a point where we can sort of go, oh, I need that synth that I heard in a club last week where it was doing this little like boom-tee-tee, womp womp, and now I know what to do to make it.
Well, actually, there's a patch, I think, in the factory sound bank called Woom-titty Womp Womp. Let me go look and see.
No,
it's Wizzy Wizzy Wizzy. I'm sorry.
Right. Well, yes, I will be working for many years before I can get that sound. That's the great white whale of unachievable sound for me.
I stab at thee. Yeah, it's the whole reverse engineering of sounds you hear, which is, when we talked months ago, or it was a month and a half ago, we talked about, hey, do you want to be part of this music making month thing? And I was like, yeah, what do you want to talk about? And he said, why don't you talk about, recreating the synth? It's like, could there be anything more vaporous, untangible? How do you make that sound? It's complete. I was talking with Josh Mobley yesterday or the day before. It's like, man, you got to do the whole drum thing. I got to explain this vague, cloudy thing. Like, how do you do this? Yeah, it's reverse engineering, and I don't know if there's a real term for it, but that's what I tend to call it. And I've got my whole PowerPoint here with some things about how I go about it. Shall we jump into the PowerPoint?
You have a PowerPoint, right?
I do. Isn't that cool?
It's very well. You win the award with PEF for most prepared.
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with Microsoft. I love.
I thought you were going to say
that,
with PEF. I was like, oh my god.
As much as it's an industry standard, man, I get really frustrated with some things. So I'm really hoping that PowerPoint doesn't go today.
All right. Well,
so far, no.
See how
it's been okay.
Let's give it a shot. So we're gonna. So you're to do your deal. You're gonna toggle. How do we do this? You're gonna toggle video off and then.
Yep.
Do your little switcheroo.
Let's see if this works. You tell me. So
I will tell you. This is.
I'm going to do my camera off.
Yep.
I'm going to do share screen.
True story.
And I'm going to say start. And I think you see my
I absolutely
record
do.
back.
I absolutely do. Hello, record back.
So now if I do this, you should see my slide stack.
I do see your slide stack. Well, I see your slide.
So, recovery with Ed Bauman. Ding. So, yeah. Learn to listen. Familiarize yourself with multiple genres. Boom. I remember those.
For people that don't know why we're binging and laughing, Ed and I were talking about the old roll strip of film things in school. You know, you'll know when to turn to the next slide when you hear that very unpleasant noise. All right. Anyway, go on.
And the tape was always warped, so it was never a bing. It was like a boom. So, yeah. First thing, learn to listen. I can't emphasize that enough. Sometimes I think it's this whole new culture. I have 4 boys. Me and James Bernard's girls got to hook up someday because he has 4 daughters, I think. So, these kids nowadays, these youths, it's so funny. I watch my oldest son listen to songs, and he listens to maybe maybe a minute and a half, and I can hear his room upstairs, and all of a sudden he switched to another song. It's like, can you just listen to one song? That has to do, I think, with, the fast availability today. But back in the day, it was a pain to pick up the needle and drop it on another track. So you just didn't. You listened to the whole album. Or it was a pain to hit forward and wait as it went to the next song. So we used to listen to music, believe it or not. So I say familiarize yourself with multiple genres. Really learn to listen to all kinds of music and really just open up your ears and listen. My kids' teachers in school say read for comprehension, and I say listen for comprehension. Don't just sit there and absorb the song as a whole, like introspect it. Close your eyes. Envision the band as you listen for that instrumentation. Picture the musicians, listen to the sounds, and you got to really analyze things like, what are you hearing? Drums, bass guitar, acoustic guitar, piano. You need to really just, close your eye. For me, closing your eyes really helps. And you close your eyes and you envision the band on a stage. Like, okay, what are you hearing? What are you not hearing? You can picture maybe, say, a violin on stage. It's like, am I hearing a violin? Am I sure I am, or am I not? Or maybe that's a viola. Maybe it's a cello, but they're playing up high. So it takes time, but you got to learn how to listen and train your ears and your mind to open up and listen for things. So once you've done that, you need to narrow that sonic mental focus onto a single instrument. So you're going to listen for the specific color or timbre of a individual instrument. ADSRs, it's synth talk, attack, decay, sustain, release, whether that's amplitude or filter or a modulation affecting pitch or pulse width or whatever. You listen for things that ramp up and ramp out, so it's not just a static on-off sound. You're actually hearing things ebb and flow. And then listen to effects. You need to be able to identify those effects. And I don't want to scare anybody away, but it does take time. It's not this instant. Chew the red pill, and all of a sudden you're awesome at this. It takes a lot of time. I've been doing it for, since like 80. So 30 some odd years, 31, 32 years. So yeah, you need to narrow that sonic and mental focus onto a single instrument. And once you do that, you can identify that specific instrument that was used. And here it opens up this macro-micro thing, like, okay, you're narrowing down more and more and more. So let's say you're just focusing on just the piano. Well, what kind of piano is it? Is it an acoustic upright? Is it an acoustic grand? Is it a Whirly? Is it a Rhodes? Is it a CP70? Lots of different options. And the only way you can get to that point where you can hear it and go, yeah, that's a CP70, is just, it's time, it's experience,
Is there somewhere, Ed, that we can go? Like, I'll just take the Rhodes as an example. If we wanted to listen to a song that is a classic Rhodes song, so that we can kind of get the sense for that, so that when we hear it in another track, we go, oh, that's like that song that I listened to. Now I can tell that's a Rhodes.
Yeah, can I name one, or? Yeah,
like if you can't, then don't. But
yeah, no. And when I think of Rhodes, I think of Billy Joel.
Great.
I grew up listening, or not grew up, but in the 80s, I really got into progressive rock. So I think of like UK. A lot of jazz is Rhodes. A lot of rock pop in the 80s and 70s was Yamaha CP70 electric grand. I love the CP70 sound. It reminds me a lot of Peter Gabriel stuff. Wurlitzer, like Ray Charles, I believe, played a lot of Whirly. And of course, acoustic grands. We all know what a piano sounds like, hopefully. Sure. But yeah, I'm sure the audience can think of all kinds of examples quicker than I can about, what's a Wurlitzer, what's a Rhodes. Sometimes I get the Whirly and the Rhodes a little bit mixed up in my ear, just as far as like, tone. You could take a Rhodes and change the tone and the timbre a bit and put some EQ, and it's like, if it's buried in the mix, it's like, that's a Rhodes. No, it's a Whirly. No, it's a Rhodes. No, it's a Whirly.
The Beso Ridiculoso from the chat is, I love his name, by the way. Beso Ridiculoso says Supertramp had a bunch of songs with I don't know if it was with the Whirly or the Rhodes, but
yeah, I think Supertramp was a Yamaha CP70. And I think isn't there CP70 in the? I think there's a CP70 in the factory sound bank.
I'll say yes.
Boy, I need my glasses.
Based on no knowledge whatsoever. I don't know. Maybe it is.
Maybe not. I think I do have one though. I don't know where I got it, but I think I got one. Let's see. Oh, here's a CP80 I have. Let's see what this sounds like. Yeah, so that's Supertramp, I think. It's got a very unique sound, and I love running that that Yamaha CP70, CP80. I mean, check this out. This is going to end up beautiful. I love it. So here's a little bit of amplitude release because I don't have and I'm only playing on a 25-key EMU X board. So I'm going to turn up the release because I didn't plug in my sustain pedal. So there's the CP80, and then if you really want to just lose yourself, put a CF101 on it. It's a classic sound. Turn up the rate a bit. And then le reverb du jour, a little bit of RV 7000.
Richard Marks is writing in the chat. He wants his piano back.
What's that?
I said Richard Marks is commenting in the chat room. He wants his piano back.
My piano back. Yeah, so CP70, CP80, all these different pianos.
Very interesting, though. Yeah. Ruka Fest in the chat says instant Phil Collins. That's true. This is sort of that, what's that song, if you could... I can't remember.
Endless Love, or...
Yeah, no. And then take a look at me now. I'm not going to sing it.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway... No Phil Collins. Okay, yes. James Bernard has banned Phil Collins.
Just an ambulance. You're coming back to me.
And you guys thought we were going to make synthesizer noises. No, this was just a big troll. It's like a Rickroll to get you to listen to Phil Collins.
Never gonna give you up.
Oh, Matthew Clary, Against All Odds. Yes, correct. Ding, ding.
Matt Clary. I just poked Matt Clary.
Wow, fill roll. Yes, we've just done a new interactive Ustream fill roll. All right.
So anyway, Matt Clary, thanks a lot. Matt Clary's a good guy.
All right, I've totally distracted you from your otherwise very informational PowerPoint. So
No, that's fine. There's all sorts of other distractions that could happen. I mean, who knows what could happen? What? What is that? Oh my gosh. Hold on. This is ridiculous.
Oh.
All right.
Oh,
There'll be no more roosters in this broadcast.
If you guys haven't, if you're tuning in and going, what are they doing with the roosters? You got to watch PEF's Music Making Month event to appreciate. So did you just wipe them out? Are the roosters gone?
I totally did.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but there's other animals here, so let's hope they don't show up.
Does this mean I should start working up one of those no animals were harmed in the making of this broadcast?
Quite possibly.
Oh, no.
Who knows what's going to happen?
Oh, jeez. All right, carry on.
So once you identify, let's say, the piano, I mean, these things are pretty clear that the whole Yamaha Rhodes Whirly acoustic grand. But if it's something more esoteric, something more of like, a synth kind of thing, what you want to do is make a mental audio thumbprint of it. And so you want to get that sound in your head. And this is one of those, like I was saying earlier, it's this cloudy, vague, intangible thing. Like, well, what do you mean make a mental audio thumbprint? Like, you can like hear the sound in your head and you just move outside of that song and think, okay, if that is that sound, what does that sound like an octave higher, an octave lower? What if I play a major chord with that sound, a minor chord, and so you start hearing and feeling that patch in your head, and in your musical mind you start like recreating it. You're making this mental audio thumbprint, is what I call it, in your head. And so now you're starting to like familiarize yourself with the patch, even though the only place it currently exists is in that song that you're trying to recreate. So then that just comes from experience and doing it over and over again. And then here's the big step. The last point on this slide is go find or recreate that sound. Some of these pianos and stuff, you can just go find them in a refill, but sometimes a refill is not the answer, and it comes with experience. But like I'll listen to a song and it's like, okay, that's a string pad. I can spend 15, 20, 30 minutes pouring through tons of refills trying to find that exact string patch, where for me it's like, never mind that, I'm just going to rebuild it. I know it's probably there somewhere, but I'm just going to build it. I'm going to go and pull up a combinator, throw a mixer in it. I'm going to use the subtractor or Thor, and I'm just going to rebuild that patch because it's quicker. Eventually, it takes time, but yeah, eventually you get to the point where it's like you can recreate it quicker than you can go find it.
Gotcha.
Other tips for learning to listen: learn to listen for highs, percussive cymbals, rides, crash. Learn to discern the different things, like what's a crash versus a ride versus a bell ride versus a sizzle. I think they call it sizzle ride versus a hi hat versus dark hi hats. Splash, crash, chinas. There's so many different things to learn what they sound like. Shakers like a cabasa or a egg shaker or a maraca or any kind of other percussive thing that you can shake and get that some kind of sound. Learn what they all sound like. What's the difference between a clave and a side stick and banging two drumsticks together? They all sound slightly different, and it all just comes from experience and listening and opening your mind to learning that stuff. Other kind of high things are like crisp acoustic guitars that are EQ'd nice and clear. Sometimes when I'm listening to a song, it's sometimes hard to hear the acoustic guitar because it's doing this chicka 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 chicka, and it's strumming, but at the same time the percussion guy is going shh, 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 with and two eggs in his right hand, and then the drummer's going, so they're all like in this same high end range, and it's like it sort of all gets jumbled together. So it takes a long time to learn how to hear a track, and I totally recommend listening in stereo because it helps a lot. But it takes time to learn to hear a track and go, yes, I am hearing a hi-hat, and I'm hearing a shaker, and I'm hearing an acoustic guitar. Because it can get kind of lost on my end.
Gotcha.
And then same for lows. Learn to listen for lows. Kick drums, bass guitars, low brass, synth bass. They're all fighting in that same range. So it takes time to learn what each one's doing and how to discern one from the other, or when they're together, or whatever. And then you got to be aware of overlaps. Sometimes a track will have a guitar and a piano, and they get into this area where they kind of mesh together. I mean, it's like you can't quite tell if that's a guitar or a piano. They might be playing the same notes, and like I said earlier, hi-hats or shakers, they get a little mixed up sometimes. And yeah, always listen in stereo. There's a better separation of those conflicts. So sometimes I work on a track and then I suddenly realize, like, wow, I've got a mono version of this song. This sucks. And then when I listen to the stereo version, it's like the hi-hats panned a bit to the left and the shakers panned a bit to the right. And it's like, okay, now I'm hearing there's a shaker there. I did not hear that before. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes claps get lost with the snare drum. You listen to it in mono, you're hearing just a snare drum. All of a sudden you hear the stereo version. It's like, whoa, there's claps in there. Did not realize that. So always listen in stereo. And then over time, your ears and your mind will learn to do this faster, easier, better, and just be patient. It does take time. There's no magic pill. There's no be-all, do-all, answer to this. It's just an investment of time. So we move from learn to listen to learn to research. This is huge for doing or recreating a patch. Search out other sections of the same song. There have been times where I've done a song and I listen to this and it's like, oh, that synth patch is, wow, I'm trying to rebuild this and I spend 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes like, this is getting frustrating. And I think, well, I'll come back to this patch. I'm going to go and work on the rest of the song. And then I make it over to, like, verse 2, and all of a sudden they're doing something different, like maybe the acoustic guitar has been pulled out of the mix, and maybe the electric guitar is now doing something plucky and subtle, and all of a sudden you can totally hear that synth. It's like, well, had I known that 45 minutes ago, I would have gone straight to verse 2 and learned how to make this patch. Now you can hear it clearly. And you can use that as a reference to build it. And sometimes it's a slightly modified patch. I've done songs where you think you're going to have to build another patch for verse 2 or the second chorus, and you find that, wow, that patch that I built in the first for the opening of the song, it's that same patch. 2.5 minutes later, they just put a little release on the amplitude envelope and put a little attack on the filter, and it's the exact sound I need. I didn't have to rebuild anything. Search out other songs on the same album. Sometimes I use the same patches on other songs. Search out other albums by the same artist. They might have used that same patch on a different album, different song on a different album, and you can hear it more clearly. Search out other versions online, like a live version or an extended version or like a DJ remix. Those guys have access sometimes to individual stems, and they'll pull that patch right out and use it differently. And was one of the songs I did, a Human League song, and I heard something that someone did, like a remix. It's like, oh, now I'm hearing that patch. Cool, thank you. And I was able to recreate it much more easy than listening to the original. It's easier to hear notes, too, not just patches, but individual notes. I did a Depeche Mode, what is it, People Are People, the verse. There's this synth going, and I couldn't hear it in the recorded version, but a live version, you can really hear what they're doing.
Interesting. Search
out cover versions by different bands. Sometimes that's a good idea. Sometimes they're really bad, and it's not a good idea. Search out other songs in the same genre, and if you need to, sometimes it does help to slow down the speed and or pitch of a song. You can sometimes hear a patch if you slow down the song, say to drop at a full octave, so it's going half speed. You might hear a patch and go, oh, that's a piano sound that they tuned up an octave higher. Or you might turn the song up an octave, and then you could all of a sudden hear, like, okay, that sounds like that old Fairlight flute sound. Didn't realize that till I turned it up an octave. And so you can go about doing it that way. And then here's the all difficult thing: learn to play. Don't worry about perfect pitch. Some people have perfect pitch. I don't. But do try to improve your relative pitch. You should learn how to, hear like I'm playing a C there. There's a interval. So you should really train your ear to be able to hear that and go, no, 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 that's a fifth. And when I was growing up, I would have different songs that I would use as helpers for different things like that. Like for me, growing up, learning how to play music, this, let's go down an octave here. That half step, that always reminds me of Jaws, you know? So I'd know if I'd hear that, I'd go, oh, that's
Phil Collins' Jaws, you know.
It's still Phil Collins, yeah.
That's the lesser-known movie where Phil Collins attacks a beach.
Yeah, it's a movie called Phil. It's just Phil Collins coming up from under the sea. Yeah, and like, that's a whole step. That, believe it or not, we used to have a cat called Lulu, and my mom used to whistle for our cat called Lulu. The third, I always think of, what's that Beatles song? I'm the Walrus.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that was a 25-key keyboard. Yeah, so that third interval for me is always I am the Walrus. So you do this thing where you listen to it and you hear a song that's doing this third interval and you're like, and then you hear the notes and you sing it in your head, you go, another song, it might be in a different key, like, and you hear it in your head, you go, da, 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 and then all of a sudden your mind goes, I am the Walrus, da, da, da. That's a third. Now just find one note. Da, da, find one of those and you can fish it out, if you don't know what key it is. There it is, it's a C. So it takes time, but yeah, improve your relative pitch. You don't need perfect pitch, it does help, but relative pitch is great. Start simple, learn your notes, then learn your chords, then learn your scales, and then move on to intervals and slash chords. Slash chords is like, like a G major. It can have a G in the bass. Or you can put a B in the bass of a G major chord. Or a D. So those are slash chords. And I highly recommend this website called musictheory.net. And they have online ear training things and
right.
Really cool website.
In fact, actually, on our user forums, I just saw that I believe it was Seelig, a member of our forum, created a an ear training combinator that will help you sort of learn intervals and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was going to say Giles just released a refill, and I believe it's free. It's an ear training thing, which is really cool.
True story.
Highly recommend that, too. And with this also, over time, your ears and mind will learn to do this faster, easier, better. Be patient. It doesn't all happen immediately. And now we get to the heart of this thing. Learn to create and build this stuff. Totally. Know your manual. Know your devices. Know your refills. Read the manual. For Pete's sake, people, read your manual. Some people think the only thing that comes with a Reason to Record is that little getting started manual, but there's not. If you open up your install and look, there's this freaky huge 700-page something manual that comes with Record, and I think Reason's manual is like 400-something pages, I think. So there's a lot to learn, and read it front to back. And don't move on to page 2, don't move on to paragraph 2, don't move to sentence 2 until you understand what you just read. Read for comprehension, listen for comprehension, understand what you're reading before you move on. And if the sentence in and of itself doesn't make any sense, post a question on the forum, go online, Google it, Google is your friend. Go figure out what it is you just read. You know, what's an ADSR? Go find out. Don't just go, yeah, ADSR, I'll figure that out later. Learn it. Know your devices, you know, learn. And as you read the manual, you learn those devices, you know. How exactly do I use Thor? How do I use a Matrix? How do I use an RPG-8? How do I use the Neptune? It's all just time. It takes time. And no magic pill again. It takes time. It's an investment. And know your refills. I can't tell you how many people are like, you know, they know they've got a sound somewhere and they just don't know where to find it in their refills. So more isn't always better. Some people are just like these refill hordes. They collect stuff and they just, you know, can't quit downloading refills, can't quit buying refills. You know, more isn't always better. It might be better off having reliable limitations, quote unquote, versus junky excess where you've got, you know, 90 refills that's taken up 80 gigs on your computer. And when you go to find a, you know, strings, it's like, okay, search strings, and you get 297 return. It's like, okay, which one? Gee, let's step through all 297.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
You can't step through all 297. So here's the bulk of this thing. This is learn to create and build continued. And the way I do this is I always create a combinator first. That's key. And let me switch over to my Reason screen or record screen. Let's see.
Fancy.
There it is. Hey, look, it's Phil Collins again. Delete all and group. So let me switch slides for myself here. See, PowerPoint, what are you doing? So first thing to do, create a combinator. And so I'm doing dueling screens here, so you're not going to see my menu that comes up at create combinator. So there's your combinator. It automatically wires itself up to its own mix channel. Ooh-ah. And the first thing I do, and there have been times where I haven't done this, but the first thing I do is create a mixer. And even though the line mixer is more compact and tiny, I almost always use the 14.2 mixer. And that's because if you look on the back of the 14.2, you've got level CV inputs and you've got pan CV inputs. And if you use the little 6.2 mixer, you've got pan CV inputs, but you don't have level CV inputs. And so sometimes when you're doing this control voltage, you know, routing things from different sources to do some volume automation for a particular patch you're working on, you might build your line mixer up with 4 or 5 different devices below it. It's like, okay, time for some level CV automation. Go! So it's better off for me. I usually make this 14.2 mixer, so I'm ready to go. Even if I'm only using one channel of this 14.2 mixer, I'm ready to do what I need to do. And then once you've built the 14.2, like my go-to synth is Thor. So I love Thor. So you create your combinator, create your 14.2 mixer, and what you really want to do is make the entire patch self-contained. You know, this thing is going to be wired up to Records mixer. Is
there any sound that you can't make, or can you make any sound that you can conceive of in Reason using the synths and the devices?
The ones I have trouble with, that's why here's my little logo. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see the little sawtooth triangle?
Yeah, we're not getting it, but that's okay. Oh, there you go.
Sawtooth, triangle, square. I started using that as like my little signature way back in high school in the 80s. Some friends called me Synth back then, so that became the Synth logo. That kind of stuff with those classic wave shapes, that stuff I love recreating those synths because that's what I grew up with and stuff. The ones that I have trouble with are very, you know, specific things that are really hard to recreate, like ring modulation kind of sounds, AM synthesis, FM synthesis is tough. those kind of sounds where it's like they could be turning, like an FM synth. They could be dialing in on one specific setting, and then the whole patch is based upon that setting. It could be as easy as, a simple, one oscillator on an FM synth, but to recreate that, your ear might be hearing like 5 or 6 different tones in there, all on one pitch. So you hear this really kind of a belly thing that's like multi-layered. That stuff's hard to recreate. And then other things like if you have like some sampled sounds, you might hear it and you won't even realize it's a sampled sound, and then you try to go and rebuild it, and the more you listen to it, it's like they're working off a sample here, and it's a very specific thing, and to try to recreate that with the synth is tough, if not impossible. You got to go back and find out what would they have sampled, what could they have used.
Right.
So those are tough.
Gotcha. Okay, another question that comes in. Let me come back to here. Another question comes in. They wanted to know, is it better to analyze other people's patches or to use trial and error when doing these sounds? That's the beauty
both.
of the Reason Rack is that we can actually look at patches and reverse engineer them, but maybe that's not the best way to learn. I don't know.
I've done both ways, and especially if you're just starting off doing this kind of thing, totally dig into other people's patches. When I first started using Reason back in 2001, 2002, one of the guys that I loved his songs and still do is Tom Pritchard, Stomp. And when I was first learning how to do stuff in Reason, even coming from a background of doing all kinds of synth stuff, MIDI, crazy crap, and I was learning how to do, I used to know like the Sysx IDs for different companies, like 00 was sequential circuits and 40 was Korg, and so you look at these weird hexadecimal codes and go, oh yeah, 23, rolling. I don't know what they are now, I'm just guessing, but even coming from that crazy background, it was just total overload, just absorbing this stuff. Where was that going? What was the question?
Is it better to sort of reverse engineer other people's patches, or just trial and error?
Yeah, and even though I came from that crazy background of being totally into it, up to my neck and learning synths, when I heard Tom Pritchard's stuff, I was like, holy, what is this guy doing? This is beautiful stuff. He had a song where he did some oboe saxophone, something or other. And I flipped his rack around and I went, oh, look, he's using CV. And I came from a background where I knew what CV was, but never really used it in the stuff I was doing, because I was more of the MIDI era, not the CV era of the 70s, but the MIDI era of the 80s. So you didn't really need to get into CV in the 80s if you were just using the synths that were around back then. But when I saw Tom doing that CV stuff, I'm like, I need to learn how to do that. So I would sort of reverse engineer some of his patches to see, like, what did he do here, and learn, like, oh, okay, he's taking this LFO and this square wave and going here, and that's modulating the pitch. So, okay, that's cool. And so, yeah, totally. If you're just starting off, or even if you're seasoned, reverse engineer patches that are already made. Take that nice, synth strings patch from whatever refill and look and see how they did it. But a lot of that, it comes with trial and error, because you may start touching things and pretty soon you've turned that, that nice synth string sound into something terrible, because you didn't realize, like, okay, you were adjusting this, and that, and it didn't matter until you changed that parameter. And now all those 4 parameters that you thought were doing nothing, all of a sudden they come into effect, and it's like, what happened? I hit one button and it does all that. That's crazy. What's that button all about? But it wasn't just that button. It was like, the 4 other parameters you touch. So if you touch something and it doesn't do anything, it might be because it's dependent upon something else,
I see.
So, yeah.
Okay, and then third question, how much do you rely on EQ to sculpt the sound?
Not too much, unless it's a really obvious EQ kind of thing. Sometimes guitar sounds have specific tone to them, and you need to, really play around with, whether it's an amp model or some EQ settings.
Okay.
Whether you're going to run it through an M-class EQ. But pretty much the synths, Not so much EQ, more along the lines of, choosing the right filter and setting the right
Let me
filter
ask you a
setting.
follow-up, because it looks like the question was asked, similar question, but very different. Storm wanted to know specifically, how do you ever use EQ to find the sound when you're doing the analysis?
Oh, no. I know some people try that, and it's tough because, you think, well, it's a bass guitar. It's all lows, so let's filter out the highs. It doesn't quite work that way. You lose a lot of even though it's like a bass guitar and he's playing in the low range, there's still a lot of high frequency content in the bass sound. I mean, take a listen to something like, like Geddy Lee's Rickenbacker, Yeah, it's a bass, but man, it's got a lot of high-end crunch that gives it that character where he can, he's playing the bass line, but Alex Lifeson's going off on this guitar solo, and you're not missing the rhythm guitar at all because that bass guitar is really filling out the whole spectrum. Or like, what's his name? Doug Pinnick from King's X. Same thing, Guitar solo comes up, and Doug's just doing this bass line, and it's just crazy how much the bass guitar can fill in that whole area. So if you start EQing to find a specific sound, you may lose a good 50, 60, 70% of the character of the sound because you're EQing that good stuff out too. Right.
Okay. Well, okay. Let's dive back in here to making sounds, and we should. God, I mean, the evening's going to fly by if we are not too careful here. So, we should start making some blips and bleeps pretty soon.
Yeah, so let me go back to this PowerPoint really quick here, see what it says. So, I'll make the, let me go back to my screen. Stop this.
There you go.
Share screen. This screen, start. So, I believe you're seeing my screen now?
Yes.
So, even though you've got your auxiliary sends in this window here of the main record mixer, don't use those when you're recreating a patch. Leave that for overall sound sculpting. For me, at least, I like to keep it all within the combinator. Because if you're going to share that patch later, if you're using the aux buses of the record mixer, you're going to, it's going to lose its flavor and character when you send that patch to somebody. So definitely keep it all self-contained within that combinator itself. And not to eat up too much time, but when I do a recover, I create a structure track and a reference track. So someone had mentioned working on this song by Yazoo called Only You, which, let's see if we can play this here at a low volume. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play back this via QuickTime, which is off screen, and I'm going to use the tap button to find the tempo. So it's like 105, 106, right? So I've heard enough of it to say it's close enough to 106, because again, this is a reference track, so you don't need to be totally dead accurate. So now that I've created this the proper tempo, all I got to do is I'm going to import an audio file, and I have this saved as a AIF file. So it's going to import this Only You, and I'm going to zoom in here, and the song begins. So there-ish. So I'm just going to razor blade this right where I need it, and I'm going to toss that piece, and I'm going to turn snap on. Oops, no, snap off. I'm going to align this to pretty much, well, I could type it in actually, 0. So 410. So I'm going to want this to start on the beat. So I turn snap back on, and I can pull it back to measure 2 because I want a 4-bar click intro. 2. So this will be the click here, right? So let me turn this down. I want to blast you all the way. 2, 3, 4. Right, so there it is. That's my reference track. So I'm going to call this reference. And then the other thing I do is I create another track. It's going to be a dummy track. So I'll just create a mix channel. Whoops. No, I don't want a mix channel. I want to create, I'm just going to create a combinator. and I'm just going to call this structure. And so I'll put the structure track up above the reference track, right? So now what I do is I make clips. So I'm going to make a clip and call this, and I'm going to label this clip, and I'm going to call it intro, right? And so there's a handy reference to where I am in this song. This is still intro. So there's verse 1, and that is loud. So let me bring it down in the mix. So does that all make sense so far?
Totally.
All right, so let me get my left, right markers out of the way. So here's verse 1. So I'm just going to copy this intro thing, hold down the Alt key, drag this over, and I'm going to rename this verse 1. And I'm going to color it differently. So let's color it orange. So there we go, verse 1. So let me turn this down even more because I want to keep talking here as I do this. Reference track way down. Click can be off now. Actually, let me click on for a second. So this is still verse 1. So what would this be called? I always end up calling this before the chorus. Oh, this is more of a chorus, but I guess you can call this a chorus. So I'm just going to call it a chorus. Sometimes I use the term pre-chorus, which I know is
a question coming in on the chats here is how come you're not using blocks? Is that just a habit thing, or?
I'm less. Blocks are very cool for a specific type of music, but I mean, for any kind of music, you can use blocks. But I never really got into it. I just like to, the whole concept of blocks, for me, it's like I like to see the notes I'm working on, that whole ghosted feel. Sometimes.
But specifically, I think they mean specifically for labeling.
Oh, yeah, you could do that too. I've started off, I used to do this kind of clippy thing way back when I was using Only Reason. And before there was any kind of markers, there was no markers. How do you mark off things? Well, I came up with this one once we had clips that could be labeled. So that's why I do it this way. You could definitely do it via blocks.
Gotcha.
And what's cool about doing it via blocks is it puts, like this purpley color for intro, it puts that purple shade. All I see is purple. All the way down into all the
yes,
tracks.
little known fact, that was Ed on the Purple Ribbons demo song.
Yeah, so it's cool because it puts that purple shade all the way down all the tracks, that orange shade for verse 1. So that is kind of handy, and I believe the text is bigger as well. So it's another way to do it. There's multiple ways to do things.
Gotcha.
So,
all right, carry on.
Oh, listen, someone's mowing their lawn. Great. So now we're at the chorus, and this song actually seems to be pretty dead on as far as timing goes. I think 106 might have been the right number, but every now and then things are off a little bit. So since this is just a reference track, what I've done before is you can zoom in to where this, you can see that right there. That chorus starts actually a little bit later. That click, that beat right there, that waveform. So what you can do is turn snap off, get the razor blade out, and cut it, and then just drag it over with the snap off. There might be, if you drag it to the left, it's going to cover and you're going to lose some audio. If you drag it to the right, you're going to have a little gap of audio, but it doesn't matter. It's just a reference track. You just want to, go back and forth, A-B things and listen. And so it's okay that there's a little stutter there. Zoom back out.
Pef is saying that, there's some tape flutter on old Yazoo.
What's that?
Pef is saying that there's some tape flutter on the old Yazoo tracks.
Oh, yeah. Well, we can run that all through Finalizing Combinator and add the flutter. Yeah, sometimes I do these recovers, and it's like they end up sound, I don't want to be pompous or anything, but they sound better than the original, and I think a lot of that has to do with, okay, hear the sound, this is what it sounds like, but then there's no tape hiss, there's no,
right.
There's no vinyl hiss, and it's like something's wrong. It's like too clean. So it's like burning off to a cassette tape and then listen to it. It's like, oh, okay, it's actually all right.
Right. That actually raises a question from the chat here from Mary Arlen. She wants to know about analog versus digital synthesis. Is it one better than the other, radically different? Is it half dozen one, six of the other?
You mean like using actual analog synths versus recreating them with digital synths? Or
I'm going to,
like
all I have to go off of is her words, analog versus digital synthesis. But I'm going to say, yeah, that sounds probably right. You know, you see synths now that are like, even workstation synths that are digital, virtual analog, you know, oscillators. It's all recreations, but...
Yeah, and even stuff that's coming out today. A friend of mine just showed me something new that Korg came out with, which is really cool. But I don't think they put any Curtis Electro Music chips in there, or, you know, it's a computer in there. They put a computer in a case and slapped a keyboard on it. So everything these days is digital. I mean, Record and Reason, it's all digital too. So
right.
There's no analog chips that come with Reason or Record. So for me, it's a convenience thing, you know. I love the sound of old analog synths, but I'd rather, you know, walk into a gig with my MacBook Pro under my arm, you know, and pretty much walk in one trip versus when I used to play back in the 80s in my friends' bands, you know, 7-8 trips out to the car to get, you know, 5 keyboards that each weigh 30, 40, 50 pounds.
Right.
Oh, no more. So yeah, this is how I build this reference and structure track. And so now I just start listening to the song and recreating the synths. And you enter in rough notes for easy A-B comparison. So that's on my PowerPoint. So I can go back to the PowerPoint without crashing or anything. So I've already covered this. And then you enter in your rough notes for easy A-B. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Just so, you know, if your ear's not that good, just enter the rough notes. And if you can find them, easier said than done. But and then what you do is you reverse engineer the mental audio thumbprint you made earlier of that specific instrument you identified. Now, when you're doing it with a track right there on Record, you don't need to work off the mental audio thumbprint you took earlier. You can A-B it right there. And here's the hard part. You have to mentally strip away the effects you're hearing. So learn your effects: reverb, delay, chorus, flange, phaser, distortion, pitch shift, filter, like wah-wah stuff, Leslie. You got to be able to mentally pull that stuff out of what you're hearing. And try to get beyond, like, okay, like you're listening, it's like, okay, what is that stuff doing? Try to filter it out mentally, like, okay, I know I'm hearing reverb, so never mind the reverb. Let's get beyond that. Then you mentally strip away filtering, like cutoff and resonance, any kind of ADSR envelope stuff going on, like the filters opening up slowly and closing. Try to get to the heart of the sound, and mentally strip away that amplitude envelope. You know, it fades in volume, fades out volume. Mentally strip away modulation, like portamento, pitch bend stuff, mod wheel vibrato, and any kind of ADSR envelope, pitch effects, oscillator parameters like pulse width, or detuning stuff like on the multi-oscillator in Thor. And this is all that cloudy stuff, like, well, how do you do that? I don't know. It's you just experience, you know, you learn how to listen to these things, and you start stripping this stuff away mentally, like eliminating all that other stuff. And so the first goal is to dig down to the core of the patch. You want to get to the raw oscillator, which is either going to be a wave shape or a sample. And like I said earlier, standard synth wave shapes are like sawtooth, triangle, square, or pulse wave. And then advanced synthesis stuff like AM, FM, and like the PPG wavetable stuff, some of that Korg wave station stuff, the Prophet VS, that was all wavetable kind of things. That's tough to recreate, but the standards, a lot of this old stuff, it could be the standards, you know, the basic 3 or sine wave, maybe you could say 4 oscillator synth wave shapes. And then you can get into like sampled things like the Fairlight CMI, which, who's the refill by? Patrick Frid, Bitly. Awesome refill.
Right.
Tons of Fairlight stuff in there. And then he had another refill. He had a Roland D50 refill, which I won't cover now. It's in my PowerPoint. But back in the day when RAM was expensive, the D50 was doing some very cool stuff where they would take a single sample and stretch it far left and far right and cover the entire, 8, 9, 10 octave range. And it sounded fine. It worked. You don't see that anymore, really. There's all this multi-sampling stuff, which is totally cool as well. But there was a certain element to that stuff which is beautiful. It's some of that D50 stuff just sounds awesome.